Hello, everybody. Welcome to the June chapter meeting for Surfrider Ventura. My name is Bill Hickman. I'm the Southern California Regional Manager and a Ventura resident. I wanted to start tonight's meeting by acknowledging that the Surfrider Foundation Ventura County chapter operates on Venturino Chumash land. The first peoples of Ventura County for over 13,000 years are the Chumash people. This is their homeland for thousands of years, their homeland today, and their homeland into the future. They are here, they love Mother Earth, and we want to honor them. First People's lives matter, Black lives matter. We all need to do more to end racism. I figure with all this going on in the world, it's something that we just can't ignore here tonight. I'm not really sure what that more is, to be honest with you, but I'm ready to learn. I would love for people to type any positive suggestions in the chat box on how we can learn as people to end racism and move forward. At the end of the meeting, I'll read all those and open up your mics to hear some suggestions on what we could do locally, a little conversation at the end of the meeting. But first, we have some special guests and some chapter updates to cover. So let me turn it over to our first guest. Ashley Phelps and Ryan O'Sullivan are students at Cal State Channel Islands who teamed up with Surfrider Ventura on a capstone project analyzing king tides and surfing conditions. It was my pleasure to work with them and Dr. Dan Reineman on the project, so let me turn it over to Ashley. You out there, Ashley?
Hey, it's nice to see everyone again. I know Ryan's having internet issues, so he might hop on randomly. Hope he makes it here. And move this out of the way. So, what we did is Ryan and I are graduates from the 2020 CSU Channel Islands Environmental Science and Resource Management Program. We spent the last year working with Bill and Dr. Reineman researching the impacts that sea level rise will have on coastal management and wave quality for surf at Surfers Point in Ventura. And we did this by using local community knowledge. We asked you guys to fill out surveys for us and just watch the water and just put down your observations. And we had the general public take those, and then I personally would take a mile walk up and down Surfers Point every hour, counting how many surfers were in each zone. And so, a lot of people ask us what are extreme tide events, but they're basically as close as we can get to natural sea level rise. They are extreme tide events known informally as king tides, and the ones we used took place in this January and February. So they create higher than average tides and lower than average tides. You guys can see the higher than average tide on this left photo here. You can use these palm trees for reference, and the palm trees are here again, versus the extreme low tide. So in a 7-hour difference, that's how much the coast can change. And then, so this is Surfers Point, but what we did was we split it into 4 zones. Each zone represents a different coastal management practice. And so zone 4 right here is where Surfrider has implemented the managed retreat strategy. Basically, the managed retreat strategy is allowing the coast to adapt with the changing sea level versus just putting up a wall to stop it. And zone 3 is right here. You can see the seawall has started to fall into the coast, but it mainly consists of a seawall in zone 3. Zone 2 is along here, and it mainly consists of a seawall and riprap, which is just a giant wall with giant rocks. And then zone 1 over here, you can see the pier along here and the hotel. This is a highly modified beach, and because it is so highly modified, we didn't get much data from it because there was basically no surfers there, no matter what time of day or the tide level. And then this is the fun stuff. So right here, we have all of our data from the visual transects put in, and what it shows is the zone separated by colors. So this is the managed retreat right up here. Zone 3, Zone 2, and Zone 1 is not shown because there was not enough surfers to be able to show even a circle. And then on the bottom, it goes by the lowest tide to the highest tide. And the highest tide is highlighted in blue here. And the size of the circle is the amount of surfers. So basically what I'm saying is Zone 4 right here is the only zone that contained surfers during the high tide. And it was the only place that had surfers consistently throughout each day. And what this means is that as the sea level continues to rise, there will be fewer surf spots available. And if more locations start to implement the managed retreat strategies, we have a much better chance of preserving surf for future generations. And then I hope Ryan is here. I don't know if he's gonna pop in right now.
Let me see if I can find him.
Yeah.
I don't see him on the list of attendees right now.
No worries. But basically what this shows right here is our survey results. So we had a lot of people that consider themselves to be advanced surfers, which means that our surveys were very reliable because the people who we chose to represent us were people who are very good at what they do. They've done it for such a long time that they know Surfers Point and the way it reacts to the rising tide levels. And they've surfed there for a very long time, on average about 23 years. And so what Ryan did was he sat in zone 4, the managed.
I think Ryan just got on. Sorry to interrupt you, Ashley.
No worries. If Ryan wants to hop on and explain this slide.
Sweet. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
All right, sweet. So basically, we just finished talking about the recruitment survey. So from the recruitment survey, we basically got everybody's information, and then we were able to distribute that survey out to everybody else who took that initial survey. From there, we basically determined that at the highest point in zone 4, like the managed retreat area, we determined that at the highest tides, the waves were the best based on the length of ride. And we determined that through counting every single person who took off on a wave within zone 4 throughout the day. And the highest average time was during the king tides, which was sort of strange, but you also have to remember that during that highest point, there was also the least amount of onshore wind. So it was in the morning, both times. So that definitely played a huge factor. And throughout the day, if you went down the coast and if you looked at the Ashley's chart that she put in earlier, based on the zone, more waves were actually available throughout the day, later in the day at lower tides. So even though the quality of waves might have been better at the highest point, there were plenty of other factors that may have influenced that. When based on preferences that surfers had, that we determined from the survey and from the other survey, as well as our observations, we found that basically, even though the quality of waves may have been better on those specific days, the quantity of waves that people could ride were actually higher, or were actually better during lower to medium tides.
Yeah, so basically the best waves were only in the managed retreat at high tide, and then as the tide decreased, the wave quality decreased, but more surf spots opened up.
Yes.
And that is our research. So if you guys have any questions, we left our information there. We also have the coastography.org website where you can reach out to us or Dr. Dan Reineman. And I will be sticking around afterwards if you guys have any questions as well. But thank you guys so much. We had a lot of fun doing this, and it was a great experience working with Surfrider. I'm very proud to say that I have worked with you guys. So thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, we couldn't do it without you guys, so we really appreciate your help.
Yeah, it was awesome working with you. Thanks for everything you guys did. This was great. I did see a question in the chat, kind of a general question. I understand how managed retreat works, but how was it implemented for this beach? And I can answer that quickly. You know, essentially at the top of Surfers Point near the river, they moved the bike path back, basically retreated the bike path, put a cobble base and some dunes over it rather than putting in a seawall or a hard structure. And it's really held up well. And, you know, we're looking at phase 2 coming in the near future, and hopefully phase 3 later on down the road. But Paul Jenkin has documented that project super well. You can check out venturariver.org for tons of information on the managed retreat at Surfers Point. Once again, that's venturariver.org. Thanks again, Ashley and Ryan. Now I would like to turn it over to the Surfrider Ventura chapter chair, Laura Orgel. You out there, Laura?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight. It's very exciting to see all the familiar faces and what a great turnout. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to check in, and we have a wonderful guest speaker tonight. Glenn Henning's going to tell us about the start of the Surfrider Foundation, one of the founding fathers, and give us some really fun backstory and just concepts of why they started it and how it was started. But first, I'll do some updates. I just wanted to let you know that Monday, June 8th is World Oceans Day. And in honor of World Oceans Day, we are having a film screening called One Ocean. It's actually a fundraiser also. It's a Facebook event that'll explain a little bit more in detail about the movie night. It is, I believe, $12.99 to see the movie, and 50% of the proceeds from that purchase go directly to our chapter as a fundraiser. So that means a lot to us. Plus, One Ocean is a great film, and we really appreciate having an opportunity. They reached out to us to participate in this on World Ocean Day, and it's just a little snippet about the movie. It says, One Ocean Film Tour is a world-class experience featuring a series of ocean-loving films focused on adventure, the aquatic environment, and films that draw inspiration. With a vision to protect our oceans, to share the films made by people who have dedicated their lives to the ocean and all her glory. One Ocean Film Tour is a spectacular visual journey in itself. I'm sure it's going to be terrific. I'm looking forward to it. Another thing we have coming up, or actually coming up, Santa Barbara Channel Keeper is hosting a webinar on Thursday, June the 11th. From 11 in the morning till noon, Science and Policy Director Ben Pitterly will discuss Channel Keeper's lawsuit to prevent the city of Ventura from pumping the river dry, as well as the organization's role in the city-initiated adjudication of water rights in the Ventura River watershed. The webinar will also include a virtual tour of the Ventura River and time for Q&A, and you need to register in advance. On June 13th, Ventura Water is hosting a virtual ocean-friendly garden tour led by Laura Bauer. Details will be coming soon. We will be sharing their event on our Facebook and Instagram. That should be good. Saturday, June 20th is International Surfing Day. Every day, the Surfrider Foundation and our volunteer activist network work to protect our coasts. On International Surfing Day, we take a moment to celebrate and enjoy the beaches and waves that we all love. We will also be using ISD to raise awareness of the urgent threats that climate change is having on our coastlines and oceans. Matilah Dam update. They've received another grant for $5 million from the State Wildlife Conservation Board, and that will fund the final design and engineering for the removal of the dam as well as downstream levees. So they've been doing amazing, amazing work. This funding will keep the project moving forward after the current work is actually happening right now under a $3.3 million California Department of Fish and Wildlife grant. It will be completed in 2021 and get these other projects shovel ready. We now have an active YouTube channel. It's Surfrider Foundation Ventura County. We've been doing a lot of virtual work. We've been doing Instagram takeovers. We've been recording, like this meeting tonight is recorded or will be recorded. And we're uploading everything to our YouTube channel. So in case you want to revisit some of the work that we've done, the people we've interviewed, it's been really amazing. Last Saturday, we had Michael Doshi from Agilita and Wayfinder Society, which was incredible. If you missed it, I think that you should definitely tune in. Thanks. A big shout out to Cassie for holding that fort down for us. If you're interested in signing up for our newsletter, then please do that through our website, and that'll keep you updated on all of the events that are happening, even virtual ones with our chapter. So Cassie is going to give us an update on the ocean-friendly restaurants.
Great. All right, guys. I don't have a link for the Santa Barbara Channel Keeper, but I'm going to look for it real quick and I'll throw that in the chat. Anyways, hi guys. I wanted to give a quick shout out to our growing ocean-friendly restaurants program. for their dedication to sustainable restaurant practices, even during this pandemic. I'm pretty stoked to report that 7 out of the 8 of our restaurants have reopened for dine-in. So if you've never heard of an ocean-friendly restaurant, I'll give you a breakdown. They commit to 5 criteria. It's no styrofoam, proper recycling practices, reusable tableware, or utensils to go provided only upon request, no plastic bags, paper straws upon request. And then they also commit to 2 to 7 more practices, but I'll put the link in the chat for anybody who wants to read more about that. This program is super important because it starts with teaching sustainability with just one customer at a time. It increases awareness, it drives behavior change in how we go and order our food and how we buy it, and it ultimately creates a scalable impact to reduce our plastic footprint, starting with our restaurants. And that all said, these restaurants need our community support to stay in business right now more than ever. If you have the means, please consider dining in or ordering to go from any of the restaurants I'm about to name. All but one have reopened, and I'll name off that one. So if you're in Ventura, check out Rincon Brewery, Jimmy's Slice, Marie Shannon's, and La Caseca Modern Cuisine, and the Aquafront Beach Bar, of course. I don't know if the bar's open yet, but the restaurant is in the Crown Plaza Hotel. If you're in Oxnard, go to the Coastal Grill and the Mandalay Beach Restaurant or Hollywood Beach Cafe. If you're in Ojai Roti is open. Sage Ojai has not opened yet, but I'll put an announcement on our social media when they have. So they all have different times. A few of them are different from their normal operating hours. So check out their websites. It's in, it'll be on our page, and then it's also in the newsletter. So
Is Harvest open? Harvest Cafe?
oh yeah, and Harvest Cafe is open. Oh, how could I forget?
Good. And then, yeah, that's great. I thought that they opened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And is Cask Ale House open? I don't know.
They are still taking to go. I believe they're open.
Okay.
I do think they're open. I have to double check. A few restaurants just decided within the past few days to reopen as Ventura slowly reopens.
Yes.
So,
Thank
yeah.
you. Thanks, Cassie. So Danielle Rose now is going to give us an update on beach cleanups.
All right, so now that our beaches are open, we're able to recreate. Surfrider headquarters has given some updated guidelines for solo cleanups. So solo is defined as a cleanup by one person or one household unit. So we're hoping that until we can meet again down at Surfers Point and C Street for a group cleanup, that individuals can submit their trash data to us. Our newsletter went out, and we have our paper data collection card that was in the newsletter, but Cassie also put together an awesome Google form that you can just enter all the data in on your phone or on the computer when you return. We encourage you to go to whatever beach is convenient, or if you've noticed some particular hot spots with trash, bring those to our attention so that we can send people in that direction to collect trash and send data our way so we can quantify some of the trash that has been left on the beaches during COVID-19. And then send us photos on social media. So you can send them, you can tag us on Instagram or Facebook, or send them to our email at beachcleanups@ventura.surfrider.org. And I'll post a link to the blog post regarding these new guidelines. And yeah, we hope that you can get out to the beaches and start picking up some of the trash. Thanks.
Speaking of hotspots, thank you for saying that. I think that because we can't do group cleanups right now, if you guys see a hotspot, something that a big trash area that needs special attention, if you could let us know through social media, or you can email Cassie at info@ventura.surfrider.org or Danielle at beachcleanups@ventura.surfrider.org, and we will make it a priority to figure out how we can mitigate that trash. Also, to the hold on to your butt ash cans, they've been pretty kind of like sitting there because the program's been on hold this whole time. So if you see ash cans that are overfilling, please just let us know, and I'm sure we'll get to them as soon as we possibly can. So without further ado, we have a very special guest speaker tonight, Glenn Hening, one of the founding fathers of the Surfrider Foundation. We're very excited, and albeit it's virtual, I'm so happy it's tonight because I think we need a distraction. We need to be reminded of, you know, the heart that Glenn and his colleagues put into starting the foundation, and he's going to share with us that tonight. Thank you so much, Glenn. We're going to unmute you. Yay, right? Virtual applause. Okay.
There we go. All righty. It has just been so wonderful to see what you're doing, all of you. The data intensity, the dedication of time and effort, the broad reach from the One Ocean movie to the ocean-friendly restaurants. I mean, it's fantastic. In some ways, it confirms all the dreams we had a long, long time ago, especially as you'll see in the presentation. When I was working at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, we had this vision of creating, moving information. And Surfrider, I once referred to it as a 5-speed automatic transmission of data. And so you've really done that. It's just fantastic. I can't be happier about that. Bill, what do I do? Should I just share my screen and off we go here?
Yeah, you got it. Go for it, Glenn.
All right, so here's the share screen, and here is the PowerPoint, and let me go ahead and play it. And does everybody see that full screen okay?
Yes,
yeah, looking
you.
good.
All righty, so this is the way I've started this presentation since the 25th anniversary, and thanks to working with Chris Blakely, we've updated it, and of course his company Main Street Media really made the whole thing get off the ground, because at one point Chris said, we kind of did something interesting back then, maybe we should kind of memorialize it in a way. And so here we are, and once again it starts with Margaret Mead's quote, because indeed that's all of you. I always like to dedicate this to some key influences in my surfing career, friends who are no longer with us. But fortunately, Surfrider is still with us. And although after its first 10 years, there were some questions. I mean, could this really represent something that was going to work for the entire surfing community? And as you'll see in the story, the question was, we made it to 10, but will we keep going? Well, there's the 10th anniversary t-shirt, and there's the 15th anniversary t-shirt. There's the 20th anniversary logo. There's the 25th anniversary t-shirt, and they didn't print one for the 30th or the 35th. So I'm going to take you all the way back to the very first Surfrider Foundation t-shirt that we designed when we were brainstorming what we wanted to do in the world of surfing. All right, so let me get started it's a 4-part presentation, and I'm going to hustle through it. How am I doing? Talking too fast? Can everybody hear me, etc.? I guess.
Far so good.
All right. Okay, if we're good, we're good. All right, so roots in the surf zone. Surfrider came out of a particular era in West LA, and it came out after a particular attitude that a group of us had about riding waves, and the idea of just how invested we wanted to be in something, especially in the years of the transition from longboards to shortboards. Now, one of our original heroes was this guy, Mickey Dora. And he was a hero he was a rebel without a cause. In fact, his only cause was himself. And we adopted a little bit of his arrogance, but it has to be said that Mickey Dora was patient zero when it comes to the plague of localism. He was probably known for his style and his charisma, but he was also very known for being a very selfish and vicious human being when people were stealing his waves. And so even though Mickey gave us a little bit of that rebel attitude, which we held on to our benefit, we left a lot of Mickey Dora behind because he just wasn't about community, which was our goal. We started our own version of surfing with the Natural Progression Company. We built surfboards that had no logos on them by any means. We surfed the ranch we boated in. We were surfing. This is Silver Strand. At the time, it was known as Hollywood by the Sea. We were the guys who pioneered surfing middle of the beach. You know, getting us, again, at the ranch, surfing rights and lefts, surfing really good waves, challenging ourselves on really big days, surfing in really cold water. And in doing so, we got to see what the surf zone is. Just a miracle. This is a shot I took with after a wave had just broken and the offshores were blowing the spray back. And to this day, you can see those kinds of rainbows here at Oxnard Shores. And you can also see things like this where, you know, 10-foot peak steaming through at Silver Strand, streaming a prismatic cloud of spray behind it, you know, with the mountains covered in spray. That was our version of surfing. Okay, Zuma Beach. And we even had a film about us. Hal Jepson, rest his soul, is a dear friend, and he filmed us surfing all these different places and doing the things we were doing. And he once asked me, what do you, I got to come up with a name for this movie. And I said, okay, Hal, why don't you call it Cosmic Children? And he did. So that's one of the key ideas behind where our passion for surfing came. And the word passion gets used a lot, but it has to do with falling in love with something that becomes really valuable to you over time, to the point where you'll go travel around the world and you'll live in a tent and, watch waves at dawn and wait for days like this. Lennox Head just firing, and we were on it, and this was before leashes, I might add. Then I went and lived in El Salvador for 5 years because of the point breaks, and also because I could teach school in the capital city. Of course, living in a third world country certainly gives you a perspective on things, and not the least of which is just how lucky we are to be here in Southern California, and just what we owe in terms of how we've been blessed to be here, as opposed to in a country like El Salvador, which descended into chaos about a month after I left in 1980. But the waves were perfect. And this is a point break that's me paddling out. And so we were there for good reason. But so it was time to leave El Salvador and come back to the real world of Southern California, where I had grown up, and essentially shift gears and into part two. And that's me and my daughter, the moments after she was delivered. Because at that moment, that's when Surfrider was basically born. We had plenty of ideas previously, but the whole reality of having a child brought me to a point where I had to answer for my surfing career. I had to say, well, yeah, I did all these things, and yeah, but of what benefit is all of that going to be to her? Because at the same time in the early 80s, surfing was changing, and we weren't very happy about it. The surf industry, it's so-called, it must be remembered that there's never really been a surf industry other than the guys who are making wave basins and pools around the world. No, the surf industry is not the surf industry. It's the clothing business with a really good hook. And once you understand the surf industry in those terms, well, things, gives you a different perspective. Of course, the Dayglow era of pro surfers and the OP Pro and the ASP and this whole swool of commercialization and competition in the early 80s kind of turned our stomach. And so when my daughter was born, who now works at the Surfrider Hotel across the street from the pier and has been getting Malibu really good on those off days or those crowded afternoons. The idea of starting the organization was prompted by a decision that stemmed from being a dad, and what do I owe to future generations? Well, also at the time I was working at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, where imagination and hey, let's do something nobody's ever done before, that kind of stuff's sort of the coin of the realm at a place like JPL. And I was working on the Galileo spacecraft mission to Jupiter, and there I was able to develop a sense for information management and just how you can pursue the idea of creating an organization that will be very effective in terms of moving information. Of course, this guy moved a lot of information at the time too. And so, and Springsteen, as it turns out, he was somewhat of a surfer back in New Jersey. But the idea of rock and roll energy and the idea of, well, you got something to say, get up stage and say it. And so then the Olympic Games. And in 1984, we took advantage of how inspirational that was. And in one afternoon, a friend of mine and I, L.J. Woods, sitting in the Coliseum down at the far end, close to the torch, we came up with, thanks to the inspiration of the Olympics, we came up with these notes. And these two pieces of paper are the actual pieces of paper that we wrote on in a little spiral notebook that I had with me that day. And these are the original ideas behind the Surfrider Foundation. And you can see where there's any number of things that might be, pretty familiar, the idea of scholarships, but also the foundation is a service club, and in all caps, localism, because we really didn't like it. And we'd been victims of it, but more important, we'd been perpetrators of it too. And we knew that that was just the wrong thing to do, given how blessed we were as surfers. And so, and you can see that throughout our culture in some ways, the idea of xenophobia. I mean, I wrote that word in 1984, sitting watching the Olympic Games, dreaming up Surfrider, and that word is 100% relevant even as we speak. So the idea of creating something that was going to change surfing completely, and so these are the original notes. And we had to figure out, well, what are we going to call this organization? Well, it's named Surfrider because when I came out here as a boy from New York, we landed at LAX at night and we went straight to the Surfrider Hotel in Santa Monica, where Shutters is now, right on Ocean Avenue. And so in the morning, everybody was asleep, but the light was coming through the drapes. And I was from, brick brownstones in New York. I'd never seen drapes or sunlight. And I wake up and I open the drapes and go out through a glass door, which I'd never seen before, out onto a patio. And there's Santa Monica Bay, as beautiful as it could be. And I was so taken with the Santa Monica Pier. There's POP, the blue Pacific, the offshores are blowing. And I go back into the hotel room and I said, wake up, everybody, we're here. And so that's why Surfrider is always stuck in my mind. And that's why it's called the Surfrider Foundation. Of course, that sounded good, but, given our reputation as bon vivants and, rebels with a cause, we had to make it sound respectable, kind of like that Rolling Stones song. So that's why it's called a foundation, because foundations are very solid and they give away money. So that's where the name came from. And then a few days later, we took our original ideas and cleaned them up and prioritized things. And so you can see that there's any number of ideas that we had then that have been put in place over time by Surfrider to one extent or another. But many of those ideas have already been picked up by other organizations. And so the dreams we had back then of completely changing surfing in a way, we're pretty stoked that we were able to create a voice that has resonated over time. One of the things we wanted to do was create a completely new version of a surf movie in contrast to the endless summer and that version of chasing that perfect wave all around the world. We wanted to create a version of surfing that was all about taking responsibility and the idea of facing the challenges of surfing from a completely different perspective. And Chris Blakely, again, you can see his name. He was integrally involved in the development of that movie. And because we thought, well, Jacques Cousteau does movies, we'll do a movie. And in fact, we also wanted to create surfing parks based on our experience of surfing Dogtown, Pop Cove. And of course at JPL, sure, why not try to do that? But we also thought we would have at our surfing parks, we would have park rangers where we would have people, demonstrating, a version of etiquette. And Sean Thompson, and we were dreaming this up, and little did I know that a couple years later, Sean would be play an integral part in Surfrider's growth. And so we thought really big, to the point where, yeah, we should have a seaplane too. Cousteau's got one, right? Of course, he had a PBY 5A. This is only a Grumman Albatross. But still, the idea of doing something significant to establish surfing as a way of life that can inspire people to be generous, to be kind, to be engaged in public service. And we thought that was as radical as anything surfers could do. So finally, the day came when I got to sign the papers. Of course, it was a team effort, but when the time came to sign the papers, everybody's kind of looking at each other like, well, who's going to be the agent for service of process? And, some guy, well, we just bought a house. I don't know if I can commit to that. And another guy said, well, yeah, I don't know if I'm able to do something like that. I don't know what my parole officer would say, so I better not sign it. And, but the idea of, being the last guy on the peak, and I said, no, I'll do it. And so the legal realities of founding Surfrider, rest on my signature. But at the same time, you had a reality that necessarily required a team of determined surfers. So here in part 3, I want to introduce some of the people whose names are on the screen, because it was absolutely a team effort. You're going to have to hold on for a second. My wife's in the hospital. Let me talk to her real quick. I'll be right back, everybody. Hi, dear.
Yeah, no sweat, Glenn. No problem at all.
So cool, right? It's so surreal to see it actually like materializing. Well, he hung up on his wife. Okay.
I love it every time I hear it. You're all good, Glenn, whenever you're ready.
Okay, back to business. Okay, so here we go. The first guy, of course, is LJ. There he is surfing Punta Abad in El Salvador. A great guy. And he was kind of like my partner in crime in any number of ways, through some adventures that we have fond memories of, if not clear recollections of. But LJ was once again the guy with whom I was sitting in the Olympics, in the Coliseum watching the Olympics and brainstorming Surfrider. To get things going, we needed some name recognition. We knew Lance Carson peripherally. Lance was a major surfer in the longboard era, a great guy, and he was up for it. But this was the guy. This was the man that I think really defined what you all know as Surfrider today. We had to take some of our original ideas about changing the world of surfing in its entirety and some of the more radical ideas we had and funnel those into an initiative that was guided by Tom Pratt, who was basically surfing's first truly dedicated environmentalist. As he designed the first degree program in coastal management studies for himself. And that led him enough credibility so that he would appear before the Coastal Commission representing surfing as early as 1983. And so Tom is just a key person in the world of surfing environmentalism in terms of his being the man who gave us a real sense of purpose when it came to being environmentalists first. And so I can't say enough about the man, obviously. He's no longer with us, and he passed away quite some time ago. In fact, for a while, Surfrider had a Tom Pratt Scholarship that was awarded on an annual basis. But unfortunately, that process became outside the management policies of Surfrider at the time. And so the scholarship doesn't exist anymore. However, I still hold on to his memory very well. And also, I'm responsible for scholarships now that are awarded through the Groundswell Society, my second nonprofit organization. But my first nonprofit organization, well, yeah, I might have been the founder, but Tom Pratt was the man. My old buddy Steve Merrill, another aspect of Surfrider that people don't know too much about, we had the Baja Assistance Program because Steve was a Baja veteran. And he was also a really good friend of mine from the El Salvador adventure days. He joined us. Chris Blakely, I think Chris is even in the audience tonight, and a big shout out to Chris for having a steady hand on the tiller from time to time when it was really an important idea to steer Surfrider in between the absolute energy that we were bringing to it and the version of an organization that Tom Pratt had in mind. And Chris was able to walk that high wire with a lot of success, and so we owe him a lot. Dan Young, Dan actually had the idea of a Surfrider style organization before I did, but he was unable to act on it, but he became very active with us. He opened up our Santa Cruz office. Donna Oakley, who worked for Surfer Magazine, as well as Jericho Poplar, therein pictured. If that picture looks familiar, it's because Jericho is the face of surfing for the California Surfing Day, and surfing being the official sport of the state of California. And she represents female surfing on that initiative. And she's a dear friend of mine. In fact, she's a co-founder with me of the Groundswell Society. And so what she did in Surfrider's early days in supporting Tom Pratt, in bringing credibility to the organization because she was such a good surfer, there's no getting around the role that Jericho played for us. Dave Moeller, he created the logo. And for many years, that logo, people would, they'd actually join Surfrider just to get the sticker. And then when their membership would lapse, they'd cut the year off the bottom so they wouldn't look like they'd been deadbeats, but they always kept the sticker on their card. So that was the crew that originally put together the organization, and there's the logo that David designed. And once again, it all was made possible by the list of people whose names are in front of you there. Of course, in the end, we were, oh, it skipped a slide. Oh, no. Well, what I wanted to show you, and I'm surprised it's not there, there was a slide that showed our first decal. And on that decal, we were able to put the words conservation, research, and education. And that's a key idea because, of course, the most important thing was conserving the surfing environment so that the idea of understanding it through research as well as educating the public, especially people from inner cities, to give them a feel for what a valuable place the shoreline is. And so conservation, research, and education. And I scanned the decal this afternoon and I inserted it into the slideshow, but for some reason it's not here. So without further ado, let's get on to Surfrider's first victory. And the whole idea of creating a new image for ourselves. We wanted to create a new version of a surfing tribe, and Bill's opening homage to, the land that we're on is very much in keeping with our original version of what we thought Surfrider needed to be. And the idea that, the village at Umaliwu, which is Chumash for the surf sounds loudly, was the site of our first victory. Of course, famous Malibu, the Gidget era, Mickey's, arena, the transition from longboards to shortboards, Third Point. I mean, it's a great wave, and I've certainly had my share of that place. These shots were of me in 1971, just when shortboards had come on strong, and I was working at Natural Progression, and Third Point was really good at that time because of the rains of 1969. It created a delta-shaped reef going straight out from the creek mouth. So we knew Malibu quite well, and we also knew that in 1982-83, when the lagoon was dredged to create these channels that you can see on the left to create Malibu Lagoon State Park, Malibu was suddenly different. And it was different in two significant ways. One, that lagoon would fill up and it would threaten to back up septic tanks in both Cross Creek Shopping Center and the colony. So they had to drain the lagoon, but they wanted to drain the lagoon as far away from as possible from their new parking lot and their walkway. So they drained the lagoon straight across into First Point. And you can see the gouges across the reef that were a direct function of how they drained the lagoon. In fact, you can even see the drainage ditch that still exists right there in the sand. That was made by a bulldozer. And at the same time, they were also changing the place from Surfrider Beach to Malibu Lagoon State Park. And there was going to be state rangers, and they were going to build a 2-story lifeguard station. You can see it under construction right there. Well, we were certainly not happy about that. And the lifeguard station burned down, as it turns out, before the construction was completed. And then we also, had something to say about the shape of the wave. When they would, for example, try and drain it into the ocean, we'd try and block it. And that's my dear friend Paul Minkoff in the Visor, rest his soul. We lost Paul earlier this year, but Paul would round up surfers off the beach because they'd come down and drain the lagoon on a 10 o'clock on a morning when the waves are good, the water's nice and clear, and then here they are going to gouge a trench to empty a petri dish straight into the ocean. So we had to do something about that, and Tom used his official connections to schedule a public meeting. And you can see that was our Surfrider, that was our office in Pasadena, because I was working at JPL at the time, so I had an office in downtown Pasadena. And in the background, you can see one of the first 3 dozen Macintoshes that was sold in LA County, because I bought it at the computer store that was near Caltech, because Apple felt that, well, that's where we want to sell them. And so that's where I got mine, and I used it to create graphics that would explain just what the issue was. And you can see how the way the lagoon channels to the right, the main lagoon channel in the middle, and then they would be draining a ditch off to the left towards the pier that would ruin the cobblestone shoal that make the perfect wave. And so we showed them what we wanted, and in the slideshow, this was pretty effective. Nobody had ever seen anything like this before. And so, and then Lance gave a very impassioned speech. And yet, after everything we said, the state parks guys were kind of, well, thank you very much for your input, et cetera, et cetera. And then Tom said, hey, he goes over to these guys and says, if you don't give this crowd what they want, because people were getting really restless. I mean, they had actually gavelled the meeting closed, like, thank you for your attendance, et cetera. And suddenly, and everybody just got really restless, like, wait a minute now. And LJ said he used a pretty choice expletive when asking these guys, what does that mean? So Tom went over there and said, you guys better think about what's going on here fast. And they did. And they said, oh, okay, well, we'll do everything we can to respond to your comments. Much appreciated. And so we got them to stop ruining the shape of the wave at First Point. Oh, here it is. Oh, I had it in the wrong place. In any event, so after Surfrider's first victory, off we went. We printed up decals on the left, and I still have that. I scanned it earlier today. And we started a newsletter, and so, off we went. we took this image of this poster that Reed Wolper produced along with the artwork by Daryl Todd, and Reed became a board member, and we started selling these. And then Sean Thompson got involved, and here's another poster we had in the early days. And so off we went. And for better or for worse, we were on a surfer's journey. And so over the years, as you saw earlier, the question whether Surfrider was going to make it past 10 years old, as it turns out, in 1994, the organization was almost on its last legs, and Pierce Flynn was executive director, and a wonderful guy, but the finances were such that, you know, the whole thing was going to collapse. And then one day he gets a phone call from Eddie Vedder of Pearl Jam, and says, I've heard about Surfrider and I think it's a great organization. I'd like to help. And Pierce said, well, thank you very much, which was interesting because Yvon Chouinard had said basically the same thing back in 1985, and he gave us $10,000 to get the organization off the ground. Well, you know, 10 years later, 9 years later, you know, the organization is like, it's getting kind of sketchy, because servicing a membership organization is very, very challenging. At the same time, you're trying to address environmental issues, you know, up and down the California coast. And so Eddie says, well, I can help. Pierce said, well, you know, I don't quite know what he says. Well, I can contribute some money. And Pierce said, well, that'd be great. And Eddie Vedder said, okay, well, can I write a check for $50,000? And Pierce Flynn said, well, yes, you certainly can. So Eddie Vedder actually saved Surfrider. He came through in the nick of time. And Surfrider since then has gone through a number of changes. We've got the stickers on the garage door of a Ventura County member for many years. The high dollar fundraisers at Malibu. They changed the logo for a while, you know, and then they changed the logo kind of back to what it was originally. But in the end, the whole idea is, where does the energy come from? And what really prompted our personal commitment to take responsibility for something that we really loved, that not so much that we were passionate so much, it was more along the lines of being really not happy about threats to something that we loved. And so it's almost as if having that at the core of your activist soul will keep you going, because in the end, you know, the world of riding waves and the surf zone in its entirety is just a magical place, from the rainbows to the tube rides to, you know, children, you know, chasing waves up and down the sand, to every oceanic experience people have had where the continent meets the ocean. You know, it's a special place, and we have a real responsibility, given how blessed we are to have been so invested in it for so many years of our lives. So that's about it for the presentation. In the end, once again, what does it take to see that vision for real? It takes courage, judgment, brains, and determination. And that is at the heart of every environmental movement that is successful, as Surfrider has been. And as from what I've seen of the Ventura chapter, everything you're doing is very much in keeping with a very beautiful idea of taking care of our waves and beaches. So thank you very much. I'll turn that off. Let's see what happens next here. Yes, the magic of Zoomland. And there you go.
Awesome, Glenn. I love it. This is great. Thank you very much for everything. The presentation was awesome. If anybody has any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat box. Before we go ahead and unmute everybody, I'd like to hear possibly from Chris Blakely. I'll go ahead and unmute you first. Thank you very much for joining. And I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on the beginnings of Surfrider.
Hey there. Let me give you my picture back again. I've been doing some work as you guys were speaking, we have a little issue right now. About 4 blocks from my house is the mayor's mansion, and there are a lot of helicopters and people meandering around. So we're a little distracted here. But yeah, I think, you know, Glenn did a fantastic job. He was the only guy, I think, who had the wherewithal to pay for the $800 fee for starting the corporation way back when, and we're forever indebted to him for doing that. Can you guys hear me pretty well?
Yeah, go for it. You're great. I'm just muting a couple people who may have a little background noise.
Okay. If you hear helicopters, you'll know why. But so far, so good, safe here, knock on wood. So yeah, it was a true pleasure to be involved in the beginning of the organization. And Glenn has been an inspiration from day one. I remember fondly spending time with him in his place when he was landlocked in Pasadena working for Jet Propulsion Laboratory. We spent a lot of hours together working on mission statements and things like that, getting things together. We got our first checkbook together. I taught Tom Pratt how to balance a checkbook. He didn't understand why there was less money than he thought we should have, and he learned about things like there are bank fees and charges that you have to deal with, and he learned how to balance a checkbook. And I saw that although my name was misspelled, I was the first person to be the chief financial officer of the foundation, and I was actually very thrilled to be elected as the second chairman of the board when Glenn stepped aside. And you know, we went through some tough times, but it's really grown so much more and has become so much better than I think even we had originally anticipated. So we're really indebted to all of you, you know, the next generations of people who have been the caretakers of this group, who've taken it to such heights. So I don't want to, you know, monopolize the time, but I could, you know, talk more about it at length. But I think that I'd like to hear what some of your thoughts were on the early days. We were really thrilled at that first victory we had in saving the Malibu Surfrider break, you know, the iconic break. That was the first thing that I think really got us going. That, and when Tom Pratt won a lot of money for us by fighting the pollution in Humboldt Bay from pulp mills. And it just started us off on the right foot. And as to the final thought, as Glenn said, you know, Tom Pratt was the one who really gave direction to the activism part, the environmental activism part of the organization. The organization was founded for the right reasons, I think, trying to, you know, have surfers give back to the community, not just take, but give. But Tom really was the leader in creating this whole environmental group.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the info. We appreciate you joining us tonight. We'd
My
love
pleasure.
to hear some Surfrider history, and thanks for adding to some of that color. Thanks for everything you've done.
Hey, it's our pleasure, and keep an eye out because we are videotaping some of the history, and it will be showing more of that, sharing more of that with you soon.
Great. Yeah, please. That'd be great. Glenn, there's a question. Do you have a memory of when the Ventura chapter was starting? Hope you're on mute, I think.
Yeah, Rex Thomas. Because what happened was in the wake of what the Humboldt settlement did to the organization, there was kind of a split in terms of just how to manage the money and manage a central operation. And Tom, bless his heart, just couldn't shift gears the way we needed to. And so he left the organization, and suddenly everybody went, well, now what? And so Mark Massara and Scott Jenkins of Scripps Institution of Oceanography came up with the idea of creating chapters. And the first chapter, I believe you could make a case for the first chapter being the Ventura chapter, because Tom was active up here. And of course, Patagonia, Surfrider actually had an office in that there's a little bicycle rental place over there near Patagonia's headquarters. That was Surfrider's office. And so Rex Thomas, Brian Brennan, who was mayor of Ventura for the time, Delia Gorey, Halverson, Larry Manson. There was a whole crew of Rob Woods. There was a whole crew of people up here. And so Rex put it all together with Brian Brennan's able assistance. And Then the Malibu chapter got going, and I was a part of getting that one. And then Santa Cruz. But I would think that the Ventura chapter was right there, at the very beginning of turning Surfrider into a chapter-based organization.
Yep, I think there are about 5 chapters who claim to be the first one, and all right there in 1991, right about there. So yeah, you're on the right track for sure. Someone mentioned they sensed an essence of BSA. I think that's Boy Scouts America in early planning. Were any of the founders former Scouts?
Well, all I could say is there were times when we were hardly Boy Scouts, but I know I wasn't. We were Surf Scouts, I suppose. I don't know, Chris. Does that ring a bell? It does. I don't know that anybody was an actual Boy Scout, but we thought that the Boy Scouts, once again, I mean, here we have, we've gone around the world, we're just surfing A+ waves, and yet we thought the most radical thing we could do would be to create an organization that would be like a service club that adopted, some of the Boy Scouts, systems in terms of, merit and honor. So yeah, Boy Scouts, Surfrider could still do something like that.
Right on. Chris Casey, who is actually our membership director at Surfrider headquarters, says Glenn's notes had a section about earning points. Was that a notion of points towards membership or something else?
I think that was in that one page. It was about scholarships. I think the whole idea of public service was a key idea. In fact, when Jericho and I started the Ground Soul Society, I've Surfriders about surfers getting sick from the ocean. Well, the Ground Soul Society is more about surfers getting sick of each other. And so the idea was, when we in creating the Ground Soul Society, the Rincon Invitational has been an opportunity to invite organizations based on their public service record. And the idea of giving away scholarships based on public service in the surf zone, that was a founding idea. And young people would, accrue points on a scale based on their GPA, based on the kinds of things they did, in terms of public service. So I think that was the points idea. It wasn't about membership, it was about scholarships.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Laura, is there anything you would like to add or mention before I test my luck and open up the mics to everyone?
Just one thing that I was thinking of is, since I've been chair, one of the biggest things I think that we focus on when we have an event is partnerships with other local nonprofits, and a walk on water. I know that, Glenn, when you and I were talking yesterday, you were talking about surf therapy, and you said Best Day, and we've had Pure Stoke and we've had a walk on water partner with us 2 consecutive years in a row at International Surfing Day, and the amount of outreach and joy that those partnerships bring to our event is beyond overwhelming. When you started really thinking about the Surfrider Foundation in what it could mean, did you ever imagine that there would be such outreach and really wonderful partnerships that we've created in the future?
Absolutely. The partnership that Surfrider Los Angeles has with Black Surfers Collective. The whole idea of in fact, when we were brainstorming Surfrider in the Coliseum, we were up at the top and we're looking over South Central Los Angeles. So anything we could do to get people into the surf zone, we were all for it. Best Day has been fantastic in that regard. A walk on water, well, in fact, both a walk on water and Best Day have participated in our Rincon Invitational precisely because they're doing something that's just beautiful. And we envisioned a version of sharing the stoke of surfing, and I mean, imagine our dreams about Surfrider, being to the point where a walk on water and best day would be a division of Surfrider. And of course it didn't, it's certainly, everybody has their lane, but yeah, it's a fantastic thing. And especially if you're doing those kinds of things, Laura, with those organizations, that's a dream come true.
It's really remarkable. It's something that always remember how much greater the event becomes when we have a partnership with an organization that contributes so much to surfing and the community. Well, I don't think I have anything else myself. Thank you so much, Glenn. You were amazing. It was so much
Awesome.
fun.
Couple more questions in
So
the
much
chat box
fun.
here. Let me hit those real quick. Regarding how to become a lifetime member, I think that has actually been phased out. I think in the early days, you could be a lifetime member for $100 and be a yearly member for $25. So it's like a no-brainer. Then they tried to, adjust the price over time, but now I think they just have the different levels of yearly or monthly support. And here's one, Glenn, I think maybe we could team up on. What are the components of
Was I
some
just
of the chapters?
disenfranchised? Is my lifetime membership now canceled?
No, all the existing ones. If you got one, you're good.
That's why my newsletter hasn't been in the mailbox. Ay, ay, ay.
No, all the existing lifetime members are still there. So if you got in for $100, man,
And
you
don't
got,
say
you got
I've
the
been
deal of a lifetime.
grandfathered in. Thank you.
Yeah, no doubt for sure. So what are some of the components of some of the chapters that have affected change? And I really think it's people and passion. Surfrider is really just an idea. It's really about people who are passionate about saving the coast, coming together as a team and, projecting change. But Glenn, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
You have to have as much joy in the enjoyment as you have anger at it being threatened. Surfrider has to, when Surfrider over the years has become less surf-centric and more doom and gloom, that's not in keeping with, a healthy version of an environmental ethic. You have to celebrate the victories, and you have to constantly recharge yourself with the pure joy of the surf zone. It just isn't over time sustainable to be constantly, fighting against things. You have to be fighting for things. And so in fighting for something that it gets you really stoked, and then when you fight the victory, you go, great, man, is this me? Are we done here? I want this. The surf's good. I'm out of here. Okay. You have to constantly recharge yourself with really positive energy in the surf zone. And, that's, and if you want to use the word passion for that, well, that word gets thrown around a lot, I have to say. But it goes deeper than that, because passion sometimes fades over time, but really heartfelt dedication to being in love with something and is something else.
Love it. Thank you. I do see a question out there from Alan Salazar, a bit unrelated, but something I want to cover. And Alan, thank you for reminding me about recognizing the Chumash people. That's something that we did at the beginning of the meeting. We plan on doing at future meetings here on Zoom and in person. You said, I've been out on Santa Rosa Island a few times with an archaeologist. I was stunned to see so much trash on some of the beaches. Does Surfrider do any cleanups on Channel Islands? And while we haven't done any organized cleanups there, our chapter coordinator, Cassie Rogers, has done some, I believe, as part of Cal State Channel Islands. So Cassie, do you maybe want to touch on that and some of the work you've done out there?
Yeah, I can't take credit for any of the work. I just volunteered on these projects. But Michaela Miller, she's a graduate from the Environmental Science and Resource Management Department at Cal State Channel Islands. She did her whole graduates program on the Channel Islands Marine Debris Program. It's with the Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary and the Channel Islands National Park. So she collected a bunch of data out there. And right now I know the Channel Islands Marine Sanctuary does go out and do beach cleanups on Santa Rosa Island and mostly Santa Cruz. But they go out there. It's I think it's put out on their website on how you can get involved in those cleanups. Usually they fill up pretty quick because they have a small boat, but they do address those, and they're doing a ton of ongoing research to monitor the trash that's out there. But I agree. I've been out there a few times on Santa Cruz in these remote areas, and it's crazy to see what you do out there, like full on. Anyway, I could rant about that forever, but you know what? I'll put a link in the chat for where you can get more information on the marine debris program. It's really cool.
Awesome. Thanks, Cassie. All right, great. I don't see any other comments or any other questions in the chat, so I will go ahead and unmute everybody in case anybody just wanted to speak up and has a question for Glenn. Let's see if we start with any other questions for Glenn before we just move into a little general discussion. Let's see. All right. Says people are unmuted. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to speak up.
It sounds like the end of one of my history lectures. Any questions?
Can we go home? We love you, Glenn.
I gotta say, that was so cool to hear all about that. I'm really stoked to hear that whole story, and that we have not one but two people on the group chat. I didn't realize you guys were both going to be here, so that was rad. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. It was it suddenly occurred to me, you know, in fact, I have to sign off here pretty quick because my wife's calling from Community Memorial Hospital. So it's been fun being distracted from all of that just to do this. And I was so involved in in what's going on with my wife that it was like, oh, hey, Chris Blakely's got to know about this. Hey, Chris. So he got wind of this about 20 minutes before it started.
I love it.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah,
Anybody remember Stanley's?
Of course. Yeah, Stanley's was a really good wave on springtime wind swells. And the problem was that when they built the freeway, they had to route the freeway around the oil facility. And so they made the off-ramp right there, the on-off ramp. That is, you know, that's where Stanley's was. So every time you get off the freeway right there at Seacliff, you're driving directly over Stanley's. That was a good wave. In fact, a guy, Gary Ross, a good friend of mine, created the Stanley's Reef Foundation because we wanted to try and put some shoaling fixtures in the ocean there to mitigate longshore sand transport, as well as recreate the waves that were there when the oil piers were there. That's another surf spot. They took the oil piers out. We thought, well, maybe we can trade the oil piers wave for a wave that that would be even better. And Gary said, well, let's name it after Stanley's Reef, because Stanley's was a really good wave that did indeed get completely destroyed.
Awesome. Well, yeah, go ahead, Ron. Do you have a comment?
Oh, no.
No. No sweat at all. Well, thanks again, Glenn. We appreciate you coming. I just wanted to circle back to the beginning. And I wanted to mention that Surfrider headquarters put out a great response to the recent acts of racial violence in the U.S. I just put a link to that in the chat box. I was asking for some comments earlier. And Debbie, you put a note in there about a group in Syracuse. Are you on the line? Do you want to mention that?
Yes, it's a fantastic organization that's been around since 1982. I believe most of their products are environmental, and they are a fantastic resource for social justice, environmental peace, paraphernalia, buttons, shirts, posters. I just bought some today because I felt like I had to do something. So it's called Syracuse Cultural Workers, and you can just go online and check out Syracuse Cultural Workers, the very ethical organization.
Thank you. Cool. Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. If you click on that blog post, there's a really good anti-racism toolkit. I was reading through it earlier today, and just a lot of simple things that you can do. And you know, I think all of us can make a difference.
Yeah. There's a local chapter of the Showing Up for Racial Justice here that you know, talks about what us white folk can do to get over our white privilege.
What was that group called again, Ron? I haven't heard of that.
Showing Up for Racial Justice, SURJ, Surge for short.
Are they based right here in Ventura County, or?
Come again?
Are they based here in Ventura County?
They're a national group, and there's a local chapter.
Okay, great. Awesome, thank you.
So this this recording will be available on our YouTube channel, and I think Cassie will probably put a link to it in a couple days on social media. So if anybody wants to see it again or missed it, we'll have plenty of ways for us to be able to share it again. So thank you so much, Glenn. I hope your wife's better soon.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you very much for having me, Laura and Bill, making this happen. And once again, what the chapter is doing is just wonderful. And all best wishes to all of you. I'm going to sign off because I got to get on the phone to my wife. So bye for now.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Glenn. Thanks again.
Alrighty.
Sounds like
Bye.
Awesome. Any other closing comments or anything anybody'd like to share before we wrap up?
Oh, I think we said quite a bit in the meeting at the beginning with the updates and the solo cleanups, and the newsletter will have a recap of every update that I gave because I stole it out of the content from the newsletter. So if you want to learn more about what we're doing or recap about what we're doing, check out the newsletter.
Awesome. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Cassie.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Danielle, Debbie, Ashley, everybody who helped out tonight. Yeah, stay tuned. We'll be back. We usually don't have a meeting in July, but we'll check the calendar, see what we can do. But stay tuned to us on social media. Cassie's been doing a great job with lots of things happening to keep you updated on ways to be ocean friendly here in Ventura and beyond. So thanks again for joining us tonight, and hope to see you all again soon.
All right. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Stay safe. Thank you.
You too.